Hey, it's North Star. Today I'm going to be going over the bracket that the ATC put out for March Madness. It is section versus section, and I think it is the neatest concept. My friend Billy Goat sent it to me, and I've been racking my brain. I've been reviewing sections, and I have come down to my winner for the March Madness bracket. Stay tuned. Just to preview the bracket, the ATC, or the Appalachian Trail Conservancy, posted this on their Instagram, and so I received it through a screenshot. And so up top it says March Madness. It's from the ATC, and they started out with 16 sections of trail. They then verse into the Elite Eight, the Final Four, until you get your winner. And so those sections are, well, you have Southern Virginia versus Massachusetts, Vermont versus Southern Maine. We have the Shenandoahs, Pisgah National Forest. We have the Roanoke region in Virginia, North Georgia, the 100-Mile Wilderness, Harper's Ferry. We have the Smoky Mountains, Southern Pennsylvania, Baxter State Park, the Nantahala National Forest, the White Mountains, and Amicalola State Park. Before diving deeper into my bracket and my choices, I just want it to be said that this was very hard for me in some of the choices and sections. I had to think back to my experience on the trail. I considered the trail itself, how maintained it was, the difficulty of it. And so some of my choices, like I said, are based on my experience in that section, and some of my choices are based on the trail itself. As I was making my choices just for the first round, it was very difficult for me to decide what would advance because I didn't want to hurt any section's feelings. And I know that sounds funny, but like all of the sections are special to me in their own way. And the people I met along the trail were in certain sections. And so to put one over the other was kind of hard. Up first on my March Madness bracket, we have Southern Virginia versus Massachusetts. And so when I was thinking about Southern Virginia, in this section, I thought about Damascus, the Triple Crown, McAfee Knob, Dragon's Tooth, and Tinker Cliffs. Also in this section was the Grayson Highlands, Laurel Falls, the Roanoke region, Marion, Bland at the Alpaca Farm, Pearisburg, and in Massachusetts I considered Pittsfield, Cheshire, Mount Greylock. This is where I spent 4th of July. So in my first section, the winner is Southern Virginia. The next section was Vermont versus Southern Maine. And for me, Vermont was very rainy. The trail was a creek at most times. My feet were wet, it was muddy. And so morale was low in Vermont, and I don't fault Vermont for that. I could always give them another try when it's dry. But for my experience, Vermont did not win over Southern Maine. When I think about Southern Maine, it was very tough. Just coming out of the whites, it continued to be hard. There were good views, and though Mahoosic Notch was tough, it was fun to do. My winner for Vermont versus Southern Maine is Southern Maine. Up next is the Shenandoah National Park versus the Pisgah National Forest. For the Shenandoah National Park, the trail is very well maintained. It was cruisy. There were waysides to eat at. I got to see lots of sunsets at good views during the Shenandoah National Park. I went to Loft Mountain Trail Magic and saw many deer and had good company through that section. For the Pisgah National Forest, I noted that this is where Big Bald was, near Carver's Gap, and I also loved the Roan Highlands. So this one was very tough for me because Roan Highlands were pretty high up on my list. I really enjoyed that day. At the time, it was my biggest mile day. And so when I was doing the Shinnies versus the Pisgah National Forest, it was tough. Ultimately, my winner for this section is the Shenandoahs. The next section is Roanoke, so the Virginia region of this, and North Georgia. And for Roanoke, I put this as near the Triple Crown and also around Daleville time. and it's versing North Georgia. And so a highlight for me in North Georgia was Hostel Around the Bend near Hiawassee. I don't think that I appreciated the trail enough in Georgia. So when I reflect back on these, Roanoke, Virginia region wins for me. The next section is the 100-mile wilderness in Maine versus Harper's Ferry in West Virginia. The 100-mile wilderness I rushed through, and so my main memories of that are lots of routes. I know that there were lakes, but I didn't have time to appreciate them. So again, if I were to do the 100-mile wilderness a different time, I think that I would have a different perspective and view on it, but I was rushing to Katahdin. For Harper's Ferry, I was there during Memorial Weekend just for one overnight. I remember thinking that the town was very neat and that I would go back there and visit. The climb out of it was high trafficked because it was Memorial Weekend, but other than that, the trail didn't really do anything for me in Harper's Ferry. So when I was comparing these two, the 100-mile wilderness won because of the many lakes that I would have liked to stop at. Up next are the Smoky Mountains versus Southern Pennsylvania. I hiked the Smoky Mountains by myself. I was around people in the evenings camping. I stayed in 2 shelters while in the Smoky Mountains. I filmed my April Fool's video at Klingman's Dome. The Smokies offered good views. They were cold, they were windy, and in southern Pennsylvania, this is where I met Mary Kay and Mike. They trail magicked my tramily. Southern Pennsylvania was around halfway, so that was exciting. The half-gallon challenge didn't work out for my tramily. I wasn't able to participate in the half-gallon challenge. If I had to choose a winner, I would go with the Smokies. Up next is Baxter State Park in Maine versus the Nantahala National Forest in North Carolina. Mount Katahdin is in Baxter State Park, and this one was hard for me because Mount Katahdin and summiting was so special to me. But when I looked at the things that were in the Nantahala National Forest, I thought about the Knock, Wesserbald, the Wildbald Tower, Standing Indian, and just making it to North Carolina was awesome. So for Baxter State Park versus the Nantahala National Forest, I choose this. In our final Sweet 16 category, we have the White Mountains versus Amicalola Falls State Park. And of course, Amicalola Falls State Park is nostalgic because this is the starting point for the Appalachian Trail. However, the White Mountains were gorgeous. They were so hard, but every climb was worth it when you got a view. For me, it's the Whites. To recap, my choices that are advancing to the Elite 8 are Southern Virginia, Southern Maine, the Shenandoah National Park, Roanoke, Virginia region, 100-mile wilderness, the Smoky Mountains, the Nantahala National Forest, and the White Mountains. Up next, Final 4. Competing first, we have Southern Virginia versus Southern Maine. Southern Virginia was very diverse, and Virginia itself I really enjoyed. I never had the Virginia blues, and so I really enjoyed Virginia itself. Southern Maine was tough. It offered good views. Maine is very beautiful, but when I put them head to head, I'm going to choose Southern Virginia to advance. Up next, we have the Shenandoah National Park versus the Roanoke, Virginia region. Again, the Shenandoahs were well maintained. There were waysides to eat at, so I didn't always have to eat what was in my pack. It was cruisy, lots of sunsets. Roanoke, Virginia region I liked because of the Triple Crown. When I put these two head to head, I put the Shenandoahs to advance. I'm surprised that the Shenandoahs made it to my Final 4. Not to look down on them, but when I think back over my trail overall, I'm not ever like, oh, that section. You know what I mean? So though I like the Shenandoah National Park, I was surprised that it advanced and was in my Final Four. Up next competing, I have the 100-Mile Wilderness versus the Smoky Mountains. And as I said before, I don't think I appreciated the 100-Mile Wilderness enough because I was rushing through it. And so for me, the Smoky Mountains advanced. Lastly, for the Final Four, we have the Nantahala National Forest versus the White Mountains. This is easy for me. It is definitely the White Mountains. Though they were hard, they had the best views. Franconia Ridge was incredible. My Final Four are Southern Virginia, the Shenandoah National Park, Smoky Mountains, and the White Mountains. For this section of the Final Four going into the championship, I have Southern Virginia versus the Shenandoah National Park. And this was tricky for me because I like both of these sections, and in my mind, I just grouped them both as Virginia. And so advancing is going to be the Shenandoah National Park, but in my mind and in the championship, I am just grouping it together as Virginia. So Virginia is going to be one of my top competitors. Also advancing to the championship, we have the Smoky Mountains versus the White Mountains, and this is easy peasy lemon squeezy for me. It's definitely going to be the White Mountains. Going to the championship, we have the Shenandoah National Park versus the White Mountains. Never in my wildest dreams would I put the Shenandoahs up to the White Mountains. There's no comparison, but again, I'm just considering this Virginia versus the White Mountains. So my winning section for the Appalachian Trail March Madness competition is the White Mountains of New Hampshire. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of my bracket, what you would change or pick differently, and what section is your winner? My overall winner for the March Madness bracket was the White Mountains in New Hampshire. Though they were very difficult, they offered the best views, and I attribute that to the best day ever in Franconia Ridge. I had looked forward to that section for so long, and it lived up to the hype. I had a beautiful sunny day and views for miles and miles. I sent this to other people that were on trail with me, and I was so anxious to see their results. I would love it if you filled out this bracket and sent me your results as well. I'm not sure if it's still on the ATC's Instagram page. If not, you can email me at audreyontheat@gmail.com, and I'll send you a picture of the screenshot that I have.